We are Rogue Media Sports.
Reese's peanut butter cups are the greatest, but let me play devil's advocate here. Let's see. So, no, that's a good thing. That's definitely not a problem. Reese's, you did it. You stumped this charming devil.
With the Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card, you can earn unlimited 2% cash rewards on purchases you want and purchases you need. That means you earn 2% cash rewards on what you want, like season tickets to watch your favorite team, and 2% cash rewards on what you need, like paying for parking. That's the beauty of the Active Cash Credit Card. It's ready when you are, with unlimited 2% cash rewards. The Wells Fargo Active Cash Credit Card. That's real life ready. Terms apply. Learn more at wellsfargo.com/activecash.
It is the Doomsday Podcast, and Ed Werder joining us live from Jacksonville just moments after this Cowboys 40-34 stunning loss in overtime. And Ed, we'll put this in perspective. I mean, I was even watching you on Twitter. The Cowboys, just keep setting all sorts of records for forfeiting leads. You've been at this all day today, and you were talking to Jerry before the game, the gift that keeps on giving. OBJ, Jerry. What did Jerry? And of course, you put this on Twitter. But what was Jerry's? Did he tell you about OBJ before the day, and just kind of take us inside what you were doing kind of before the game, and then of course we'll get into what happened after the game.
Yeah, I waited on the field for Jerry for quite some time. It seemed like almost everybody was there. In fact, the players had gone through their pregame warm-ups. They were now out on the field in uniform, and then finally Jerry arrived. And, of course, he had a long receiving line of fans that he wanted to acknowledge and take pictures with and sign autographs for. So I had to wait 10 or 15 more minutes for that to take place. But then Jerry was very helpful. He did engage me in about a 5-minute conversation exclusively about the Odell Beckham Jr. situation. And people, after watching that game and see Trevor Lawrence throw for 4 touchdown passes and 500 yards of offense and all the injuries the Cowboys suffered on Dan Quinn's side of the ball, might prefer they go try and find a defensive player rather than Odell Beckham Jr. But he told me that in no uncertain terms that this is still an evolving situation, that they're still fully engaged, regular negotiations. In fact, I asked Jerry if they had gotten to the point where there was any kind of an agreement in principle, and he said there are a lot of agreements in this whole thing, but they do not have any kind of deal in place yet. He kept saying that the major issue between the two was sort of getting the timing worked out. And I take that to mean for the Cowboys to know that he's going to be healthy when they need him, which is, by the last couple games of the regular season, and we're getting to that point now, and certainly all of their postseason games, which may amount to a single game yet again, based on what we've seen here recently. But yeah, Jerry, very much optimistic, very much still wants to see this deal happen. At least he did before the game. And whether that's changed in the aftermath of this unconscionable loss, that's now kind of two of a kind, I guess. It reminded me so much of the Green Bay game, but we'll talk more about that. But I think that all indications were, as of a couple hours ago, that Jerry still feels very confident about working this out. And he believes that Odell Beckham Jr. is going to, at some point this season, appear in a Cowboys uniform.
All right, there is Ed live from the scene there in Jacksonville, where the Cowboys had yet another stunning loss. And you're right, this reminds you so much of Green Bay. This was even a bigger margin that they forfeited. We will get into all of it. Frito, please play the music. All right, Ed Werder. And Ed, you've worked the post game, seen Jerry, I thought it was interesting, and we're going to get into some of the plays and some of the biggest things that happened. Ed, let's start we always kind of seemingly start with the quarterback. And, man, we're going to get into this defense, and it was not a good day for Dan Quinn's unit, and especially Kelvin Joseph in particular. But, Ed, we talk so much about Dak, and you know, one of the things I hear you say, well, this has been unlike Dak. This has been unlike Dak. And Dak was brilliant for a half. I mean, what is he, 15 for 16? I mean, unbelievable. And then, boy, late in the third quarter, one of those really bad interception rears its head. And
it was like the one last week against the Texans. This time it was Jason Peters at right tackle who sort of loses control of the player he's blocking, and Dak moves up in the pocket and in that direction, and the guy reaches out, hits Dak's arm, and grabs his jersey as he's trying to throw it, and he continues with the follow through, and it gets picked off. And, you know, like he said after the game, at some point I got to learn in that situation to just eat it, you know. But he continues to try to make plays, and I think, I mean, here's what I said. I said, you know, there are losses, there are bad losses, and then there is, in an entirely different category, what happened to Dak Prescott and the Cowboys in Jacksonville. I mean, this was a loss never experienced. Until Sunday, the Cowboys had won all 30 games when Dak and his team had a lead of 17 or more points. And then they go to overtime, and Noah Brown deflects this ball into the air. We've seen this happen multiple times, and it gets intercepted, and it's a game-ending pick six. There couldn't be a worse way for Dak to lose a game when all week long, I mean, it was out there on Thursday, and all he talked about was a frustration building and these interceptions, and he's watching these other quarterbacks, and they throw them right in the midsection of defenders, and the defender drops them, and Dak's got these balls that are getting deflected into the air and picked off, and some are bad throws, some are poor routes. You know, some are the offensive line losing control of a defender, a pass rusher, as we've seen in the last 2 weeks. And then to have this happen. I mean, everything Dak said before the game is the same stuff he was saying after the game, as far as, you know, I've got to take better care of the ball. I can't let this happen to this team. I can't put the ball in. And that's never been an issue with him. But he leads the NFL in interception percentage. He's got 10 interceptions since he came back in week 7 following the 5 missed games for thumb surgery. He's got the most interceptions in the NFL during that span.
Yeah, it's remarkable because, and if you do it enough, you're right. It does become kind of who you are. And I would say some of these things, and it's nice that he hits it head on, but are starting to ring hollow. To your point, Ed, I'd written down exactly what he said. He said, I've just got to not even try to throw the ball right there. Talking about the interception late in the third quarter. Feeling the guy grab me and tuck the ball and take the sack. I mean, again, he said it before it. As you said, you were out there when he was talking the other day. And he says it after the game. And I just think incredibly frustrating. So on a day when he has really good numbers for the most part, I think he ended up, 23 for 30 at one point. I mean, he was like 20 for 23, it seemed like. I mean, obviously late, there were some moments. Now, Ed, I think we need to talk about the Cowboys' decision, because they make the play, they get the fumble recovery. Jaron Kearse makes the great play. Micah Parsons gets the recovery. All they need is one first down. They're desperately. The only reason Jacksonville still had any chance is because they had all 3 timeouts. But first and second down, they make them use a timeout. Now, this comes down to sort of a game management, and you can say, well, you know, Dak has a choice of where to throw to. Right. If you run the ball there, you know, they got to use a timeout, and it puts them really behind the 8 ball. And, oh, by the way, this quarterback who played great today, but they were wasting all sorts of time even with that one timeout. I mean, now that we kind of saw how it played out, if they don't have any timeouts, you know, I don't think they're able to come down there and put that thing, into overtime like they did. Your thoughts on how the Cowboys played that out? Because on top of all that, what I just said, that was the play he chose to go down for Noah Brown down the field was not a high percentage play. And people say, well, they should have thrown that to Michael Gallup. I don't care who you're throwing it to. in that situation, desperate to make them call their final timeout. It's like it just seemed like the last thing you would want to do there.
Well, we saw on the field goal drive following that possession that Jacksonville nearly ran out of time as it was. So
yes.
Certainly running them out of timeouts and taking more time off the clock would have benefited the Cowboys and potentially clinched the game. And we've all seen situations in Mike McCarthy's 3 years where there have been serious questions about how he manages these types of situations. As much as he talks about them practicing situational football, they seem often to fail. And I think today was certainly one of those. And they knew, I mean, Dak talked about it. We knew we needed one first down to close out the game and to protect their defense. And then, as bad as the defense played, as many players as went out of that lineup, whether through incompetence like Kelvin Joseph or injury Dorrance Armstrong, they did get a stop on defense in overtime, and then the offense fails and gives up the touchdown while they're on the field. I mean, that hadn't happened since Jameis Winston 3 or 4 years ago, an overtime pick six. Just a horrendous defeat. It reminds me in so many ways of what happened in Green Bay, which was another historic loss. That again, Dak threw 2 interceptions in that game. Both led to touchdowns by the opponent, just like both interceptions today led to touchdowns by the opponent. In the Green Bay game, it was the first time in the history of the Cowboys franchise that they entered the fourth quarter with a 14-point lead and lost the game, and they lost it in overtime. And today was just so similar to that, with the exception being they couldn't stop the run or the pass. In Green Bay, at least for the most part, they controlled Aaron Rodgers in the passing game, although I guess Christian Watson had 3 touchdowns in that game too. So, and the defense, I mean, that's the thing I think that bothered Mike McCarthy the most was the injuries have really mounted on the defense over these last 3 games, in succession. And, they've lost Anthony Brown after they lost Jordan Lewis earlier in the season. And now they benched Kelvin Joseph, and, Deron Bland got an interception, but he also gave up a couple of big plays. And Dorrance Armstrong's been hurt now a couple different times. And I mean, the Jaguars are not a team that typically scores a lot of points. They had lost 20 straight games against NFC teams, the longest streak in the NFL. Hadn't beaten an NFC team in 4 years. In 4 years. And the last time they had a 40-point game was 2017. That was the longest streak in the NFL without scoring 40 points, and the Cowboys ended that streak today. The Jaguars' record when trailing by 17 or more points and from 1995 to 2021 was 1-112. This year it's 2-2. They came back against the Raiders the same way, but there's supposed to be a difference between the Raiders and the Cowboys. And I just don't know. I mean, this all but clinches the division for the Eagles, who got to 13-1 and now just have to win any one of their final 3 games. And they can do it to the Cowboys on their own field next week if they so choose.
Yeah, it's going to be Christmas Eve. And this one, I would say, Ed, no team, no franchise is more week to week. Some weeks we're like praising and thinking, well, the Cowboys, they got as good a shot as anybody in the NFC. Then they lose to the Jaguars in this historical fashion. And the whole time I was getting ready for tonight, Ed, I was back thinking Mike McCarthy's in trouble. It's from week to week. It's like, could this team possibly make the Super Bowl? And then tonight, the whole time I'm getting ready to come to the studio, I'm like, this guy's going to get fired. And that's kind of where they are. Now, Ed, we'll get into the defensive performance. I did want to mention our presenting sponsor, Marable Homes, family-owned custom home builder, building timeless classic homes in the Dallas area. More and more people are hearing about them, and they handle luxury residential new construction. Apparently, Ed, we have people listening to us that want luxury homes because they've been reaching out to Marable Homes. The website is marablehomes.com. That's MARABLE homes.com. And, they their clients become their friends, and these are gorgeous homes. And I also want to mention Lakeside Roofing, family-owned full-service roofing company serving DFW. That website is lakesideroofco.com. Okay, that's lakesideroofco.com. So we are so appreciative of Blake Marable and the Marable family, especially this time of year, and some of those houses they've built. I even saw some of the Christmas decorations this week, just gorgeous. So very, very happy to be associated with them. Now, Ed, take us inside that post game. I could hear you asking Mike McCarthy, how frustrated are you? And I thought that was interesting. You hit on it a minute ago. His answer was something like, I'm more frustrated because I keep losing all these people on defense, almost like it's what he tried to say is, we knew this was a talented team, and we have great respect for their coach. But still, to be up 27-10, to have what happened in Green Bay, at least with Green Bay, there's just a little more respect. It's Aaron Rodgers, okay? Now, again, this is a really good young quarterback who's been playing better. I think they've won now 3 of their past 4 games and are apparently in the playoff race at 6-8. But you have a team like this down 27-10. You've got to end it. And we talk about, Ed, sometimes how the complementary football, that's one of the things Cowboys love talking about when things are going well. Well, this was complementary football, like the bad way. The Dak doing what he did, and then of course the defense not being able to do its part. And this was, I think earlier in the podcast you said unconscionable loss. But the post game, you being around the players and then being around, the whole scene there, was it like what was that like? Was it almost embarrassment, amazement? What was the vibe in that post game?
Well, there was certainly a lot of disappointment and a lot of quiet, a lot of guys sitting solemnly in front of their lockers. Noah Brown chose not to speak. Jerry Jones didn't speak after the game. So that tells you, I think, how monumental this was. Players admitted that they were upset, that they felt like they had the game won and failed to close it out. They've obviously got to work on that part of it. They all admitted that they're frustrated, stunned, like I said, definitely upset. And I think there was I know Zeke expressed that, there's no one in the locker room who works harder than Dak, no one who puts more into the game, and you hate to see it end that way for him. As he said, I never thought we were going to lose the game until that interception was being returned, and Rayshon Jenkins ran past me. Not until Rayshon Jenkins ran past me did it occur to me we were going to lose this game. And I think the strange thing is, to me, the devastation in the locker room, Mike McCarthy, trying to say, hey, I did ask a couple different players, Zach Martin and Dak Prescott included, does this cause you to question what this team is capable of this year? And they both said no, that they've got to move past this. They've got to learn from it. But we've heard that so many times. They had the Green Bay game won. They should have closed out the Packers. The Packers were a no-good team that won 1 game in 2 months, and it was that game. They almost lost last week to the Texans, who were the worst team in the NFL. They're going to pick first in the draft. They did drag Kansas City into overtime today, too. But the Cowboys almost lost that game. And, that made everybody look at the Cowboys and question, whether they were taking these opponents seriously or not. And, when I was out at the Star this week, CeeDee Lamb said, hey, we learned from that game. We understand that we have to play to our standard and not to the level of our competition. And then he said this, and I used this morning on TV, we have to be who we are regardless of who we play. And they weren't. And I even said, winning decisively against inferior opponents might happen more frequently, and perhaps as soon as today, if Dak Prescott can correct the issues causing him to throw interceptions. And clearly he hasn't done that. And, even before this game, he described himself as an optimistic person. but admitted he was so frustrated that he's close to slamming a tablet on the sideline or throwing his helmet. I mean, this is the second time in his career, and never this late in the season, that he's had more interceptions than games played. It was 9 interceptions in 8 games going in today. So now it's 11 interceptions in 9 games. The numbers got worse. And I know the coaches have spent time examining this issue very closely, and they recognize there's no one real problem, that some of the interceptions have been forced throws, protection failures, his arm being hit. Last week, again today, poor route running by some of his receivers. He's like 5th in the league in terms of throwing into tight coverage windows. So that tells you that he's either making poor decisions trying to force balls into receivers who are covered, or he doesn't have any choice because his receivers aren't consistently getting open. And that's what some of the Jaguars people were telling me before the game they saw on the film as being an issue. And that certainly would explain Jerry's zealous pursuit of Odell Beckham Jr. and the signing this week of T.Y. Hilton, who didn't play in this game. But I think it's also been suggested that, missing 5 games following surgery, as we mentioned, has played a role in it. And that there have just been times where Prescott's attempted to take over games instead of just letting it come to him. So I don't know how this is all going to end, but I thought it was interesting that McCarthy said after the game, relative to their playoff situation now, almost certainly going in as a wild card team on the road, he said, hey, speaking about Green Bay, hey, I've gone in as a number 1 seed, he said, and gotten my ass kicked. And I've gone in as a 5th seed and won it all. And so I think that's sort of where he's putting his faith right now, is that once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. And as we've seen in this regular season, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, anything can happen in any game. But their failure to close out games on offense with the run game that they have, that's bizarre to me. And couple that with the fact that really what you want when you're trying to close out a game on defense is a great pass rush. And this is the best pass rush in football for most of the season. I think they surrendered the sack lead to the Eagles last week. But if you have a great run game on offense and you have a defense that can rush the passer, that's the ideal situation to protect big leads. Yeah. And yet the Cowboys, their signature is that they failed to do that in historic fashion for the second time this season.
Yeah, and I think it also reminds me, Ed, some people, want to tell you and almost scoff at people who, when they narrowly beat the Texans, or when Texas teams, hey, celebrate wins. We're not going to apologize for winning and all that kind of stuff. And then They come out there and do this. I mean, maybe that's why you pay attention when you're playing a poor team and you barely find a way to win it. Maybe there is some criticism that is warranted, and these guys don't always want to accept that. At some point, the quarterback standing up there and saying, I can't do this, that just falls on deaf ears. If you have to say the same thing over and over, and right now, he's someone that really makes some poor decisions. And of course, the flip side of that is some of these stats show, as far as like what's expected on certain throws, I mean, like he's way above that, and so there are certainly things out there that say, well, he's playing really well, but that's partly why you have to kind of watch the whole thing. People say today, Ed, well, they scored 34 points, that should be enough to win. Well, look at the midway through the third quarter to the end of the game, and they're putting graphics up that show, okay, the Jags have 100 yards right now in the second half rushing. Cowboys have 10. I mean, there were stats that were showing they were just getting punished for much of that second half. So you can't just look at it in a vacuum and go, they had 34 points. It's enough to win, because there's moments where they let it get away from. Okay, I want to talk some defense with you, Ed. First of all, though, we need to listen to our stretch plays. I feel like there could be a failing grade coming. Here is Glenn Stretch Smith. Stretch, there's already been a lot of activity on social media, Twitter in particular, wanting to see kind of what you're going to say about this. You saw Leighton Vander Esch, who you've been praising a lot this season, go down early in this game. And Clark had to come on, who's played well at times. This was a this was a game, and this was a first overall pick for Jacksonville, but he lit the Cowboys up, and they had some kind of crazy streak of like 39 straight games, 39-0, when leading by 17, and obviously they had another collapse, much like Green Bay. Let's start with the back end of this defense. I mean, how much of this, Stretch, in your mind is a product of not getting enough of a pass rush, and how much was it bad technique back there? Because over the years, you've been able to really pick apart some things about this secondary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to individually talk about guys. We'll do this a little different because I think that you had some guys play okay. I think you had some guys that got exposed in the football game. And I think that's what happens when you play good teams. You can say what you want to about Jacksonville. I go back to my days with the Cowboys, and we always kind of gave a grade, and then it was either the arrow going down, arrow flat, or going up, trending up. This is a football team that they played that is trending up, that has played really pretty well in the last few weeks. I'm going to start with saying that they went at Joseph. I mean, he got exposed. There's no question about it. He is a backup for Brown for a reason. They know what they're doing in the scouting department. They knew what they were doing when they evaluated these guys. And then, we'll talk about overall the defensive scheme and the defensive coordinator. But I think when you get beat on a two-pump, that can happen to anybody. That's a slant and go that they were able to get over the top on, down 17 points to cut it to a 10-point game. To me, you got to know the situation in the football game, and you cannot get beat deep in that part of the game. And so for that, I mean, Kelvin Joseph, welcome to the NFL. Now, I'm going to go to Deron Bland, and I'm going to tell you that I thought he played a hell of a game. I think he's a good football player. I think that he's not afraid to get on the nickel guy. That's a much more difficult task when you have to get on a guy that has a two-way go. Means he can go in or out. It's more different or difficult to play from a leverage perspective. When you're playing in there, you're more of a head-up guy that allows them to give it a two-way go. And I thought you saw some good things out of Bland. I thought you saw some good things out of the safeties. Again, I mean, I'm a Wilson and Malik Hooker guy. I mean, I think they played fine. I think that you just got exposed from one corner standpoint, and Diggs. They didn't really go at Diggs. They went the other direction and knew that's how they were going to go. So I think you give one guy an F, and you give the remainder of the secondary an okay grade, and I give Bland a better than okay grade. I'm going to say this, that we've obviously been on here and given Dan Quinn a lot of credit, and sometimes I'll go back, and we all have our own point of reference. And I can remember, Larry Lacewell saying this a lot of times. Sometimes you eat the bear, and sometimes the bear eats you. Today, I mean, it was one of those situations where it's hard for me to come out and just start dinging this defense. But the other guy that I'm going to ding is Parsons. I mean, he's a guy that we've all said he's got to lead the football team, and he's got to lead defensively. Very little out of him today. And that concerns me when you know that Jacksonville at times was without both of their starting tackles. And we know now that when Armstrong went down, I don't give a crap whether they're sliding the protection to you, whether they're chipping with the back on the way out. Whatever the scenario is, when you're still got that tag on you and you're the guy, it really hurt them today that they didn't get the pressure from the four-man looks. It hurt them. And I'm saying it hurt them because they did. There were times that they were close. They couldn't get him on the ground. And I think it drew the ire of really and exposed your secondary. Your secondary, when it's playing with the backup player, when your linebacking core, when Van Der Esch went down, and I have talked about Van Der Esch all year. I don't hear a lot of people talking about him. He's a downhill run stopper, and today missing him, it hurt them. It hurt them being able to stop the run. We saw Clark get in there, but I'll specifically tell you that right there on the drive before the touchdown that made it a 3-point game. I mean, he's got every opportunity to come downhill at Travis Etienne, who's not a great back, and he decided to he wanted to kind of float out there and act like he was going to bounce it instead of blowing his ass up in there downhill and coming and taking the angle away. He'll learn from that. You teach that on film. I think it hurt them, Armstrong going out. But again, you've got to get some inside push from your inside guys, Gallimore, Diggy Zuitt. They got to get push, and then you've got to get off the edge, because that, to me, was the difference today, was the fact that they didn't get that pressure from a four-man look. I thought the linebackers played okay, other than, again, Clark's got to, come and play and attack the zone read downhill with a good angle and good gap integrity. Mm-hmm. But the leaders in the defense, which to me are, if you think about it, it's got to be Lawrence, it's got to be Parsons. We didn't see a lot out of those two guys today. And when you don't see a lot out of them, you don't get the pressure, that exposes your secondary. I'm going to say this, though. I'm not going to sit here and ding Dan Quinn for his scheme, because I thought that what they really did was had every opportunity to go win the football game, and they should have won the football game. And we'll talk about that in a minute. You've got to know how to put football games away. Cannot do some of the things that they did on the other side of the ball. But overall, again, you take your hat off to what Jacksonville did, to what their game plan was about. You take your hat off to Doug Peterson and the fact that he was able to, scheme the Cowboys. The concern I would have going to next week is you're going to see a coach in Philadelphia who was obviously his understudy and his mentor. And I'll guarantee you're going to see a lot of the same things. So I believe the challenge is going to be for this defense to be able to go and make some adjustments here and get yourself ready to go. They don't care. Philadelphia does not care who's not playing, who's playing. They don't care. So you're going to have to get yourself ready to play here. As I'm looking down through here just at my grades, I think that, again, it is hard to look and say, boy, there's a big play. I mean, you got on the slot, you got Kirk, who got matched up against Barr one time. And quite frankly, they ran the outside slant and he ran the wheel. Barr got picked. I mean, he can't run with Kirk. I mean, that to me, that's schematically, a great job. And again, you give them credit instead of dinging your own guy.
Well,
so I'm not gonna sit here again and do anything except say, you know what, the challenge is for this defense to get their angles cleaned up and to come back with a better job of getting pressure on the quarterback, man.
All right. So Kirk, by the way, ends up Christian Kirk, you were talking about a minute ago. He's getting basically nothing at halftime, ends up with 6 catches for 92 yards. So for a lot of the second half, they dominated the Cowboys. And Trevor Lawrence ends up throwing 27-42 for 318 yards and the 4 touchdowns, had 2 big turnovers. And again, it should have ended the game, but it didn't, because they had those 3 timeouts and they were able to pull that game out in overtime. On the other side of the ball stretch, you've been critical of Dak. Some people are extremely quick to defend him. Today was one of those days where he was brilliant at the half. I mean, basically, I think he had 1 incompletion, maybe 15 for 16. He did a lot of great things, but he continues to have this issue with interceptions at extremely inopportune times. And I would say the end of the third quarter, I mean, that's as bad as it gets. Rolling out, trying to make a play, had been sacked on the play before, looking at, I believe, a 2nd and 18, and overshoots the tight end Schultz and throws a pick right there. And it really allowed Jacksonville to quickly, they had already kind of started climbing back in it, but boy, that turnover put them right back in the game.
Well, and that, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's a 17-point game like we talked about. You can't allow them to run a double move and beat you over the top. Dallas gets a decent return, and they get they get it cut back in half. They're at the 14-yard line, first down. They go to throw the ball. Right, wrong, or indifferent. We can sit here and kick the play calls. He gets sacked. And on second down, he throws a really bad pick. You can't do that at this juncture in the football game. You've got to understand, as the leader, you cannot put yourself in that. You can't do it. Troy Aikman threw interceptions. He didn't throw them at that time in the game. He didn't make those kind of plays that put you in jeopardy. This team was ready to quit. Literally, they were down 17 and ready to quit. You make a right statement. I mean, he does a lot of good things. I mean, he ran the football well. I thought he made some decent reads, and he threw some good balls. And I thought he had an excellent effort out of CD Lamb. They were moving the offense line around. I thought there was a lot of good things on the offense. You cannot throw an interception at that part of the football game. You can't do it. And so you're putting your defense, who they've got 3 backup players out there. You saw them just get beat by a double move. You can't put your defense giving them the football. Now they got a penalty on a block in the back, but you gave them the football at the plus 39-yard line. You cannot do that. You've got to learn to live to fight another day. You've got to learn that it's okay to throw the football away if it's not there. It's okay in those situations. You can't press in that particular situation to stick that ball, like you were saying, on Schultz. It was a killer. I thought offensively, I mean, you saw Dallas do some really good things. I mean, you see their receivers block their ass off. I mean, Noah Brown, CD Lamb, those guys, Gallup, I mean, they'll motion in there and block CD at one time, I mean, he got his ass slobber knocked one time going in there trying to block a defensive end, but he doesn't ever wince away from that. And to me, you got a winning grade out of those guys. You got a winning grade out of the running backs, who I thought both Pollard and Zeke ran very hard today. I like the opportunity when they hit Hendershot. They ran the double post, ran the wheel to the tight end. He goes up and makes a catch, and it was you got a winning effort out of those guys. Is just, you've got to stop with those unfortunate turnovers. And I thought the offensive line, I mean, Jacksonville's really pretty good up front defensively, and I thought the offensive line played well. I'm critical again of not the fact that he threw an interception. I'm critical of the point in the game that he threw the interception, and that, I think that's you got to take all of those things into consideration. You give them, again, you give them the arrow up, you give them the flat, you give it down. I mean, Dak, you got to quit throwing interceptions at this juncture in the game. But I do like that. I like the way they're getting the ball to CD. I'd like to see them. I'd like to see them, get Cavante in there and get him some of those opportunities. And now we'll work our way to that last series, Matt. And I think that's a perfect time to come in and say, on third down right there, you did a nice job on second down. You ran the reverse. You got the ball outside. You knew they were all down there inside. I would have done anything, literally anything, to get that timeout out of their pocket. You've got to get that timeout away from them in that situation. I'm not critical of the fact that they called to throw the football, but you've got to complete the throw. You got to keep the ball in bounds, and you've got to take that timeout away from him. I mean, think about what this team did when they got it back. Hell, they let 10 seconds just run off
while he's standing up there.
The play where they were, where they were willing they were ready to get back on the football. So again, you're not going to hear me get on here. It's easy to say from a chair, well, I should have called this or should have called that. The bottom line is take the timeout out of their pocket. And the fact that he didn't do it, we've sit here and graded the offense. We've graded the defense. They ain't doing Rudy Poo nothing on special teams right now. Bones Fossil, you're making $1 million. Get off your dead ass and get something going special teams wise. And Mike McCarthy managed the football game. Get the timeout McCarthy. Get the timeout out of their pocket.
Not even the U that some people have become accustomed to, just the flat-out F for McCarthy for the overall management of the game. And then Fossil with a rare shout-out. Boy, you've had very loving comments about Fossil. Stretch, I would just say on the play they did throw it downfield, I think that was Noah that he was trying to hit on that. To your point, it's not so much that they tried to throw it. It was, and of course that's probably up to Dak. Hey, I've got a one-on-one situation. I think I can get it deep. It just seems like with all that they have with Pollard, and as good as CD had been, and apparently he was double teamed on that particular play. It did feel like sort of a low percentage play for what they needed there. I mean, if you're going to do that, if you're going to hurl the ball downfield, do it to Gallup, who's known for high pointing the ball. Or throw it short, even if you have to. But you're right. Do everything in the world, because in college football it doesn't matter so much because the first down's clock stopping. In the NFL, it's huge to make them call that final timeout. So to me, it wasn't so much about throwing it or running it. It was what he chose to do was not a high percentage type play.
Well, I'm going to say this, Matt. I mean, if they don't have the final timeout, they don't win the football game. And defensively, you're all of a sudden, you're saying, go ahead and throw it in the middle of the field. I mean, they had to get to the 34, 35-yard line to have a chance in the field goal. They threw the ball in the middle of the field. If they didn't have that timeout, he's tackled, they don't ever get another playoff. So you've got to know situationally where you're at in the football game. I'm really disappointed that again, he got the one-on-one outside. Did I like the route? No. They were playing off all day. They were playing soft. I mean, you could have run a comeback out there. You could have run a slant. You could have run a speed out. You could have done a lot of different things. But again, the point I'm making is you got to get them and force them to use that last timeout. Yeah. It changes what you do defensively. That lost the football game for you. I don't give a crap what, or as some people like to say, whiskey shit. I don't care. You cannot allow them to keep that timeout. And I think that's what cost the Cowboys the football game. And I think you pin it directly on the fact that, hey, you know what? They had a good game plan. The Cowboys had a good game plan. But the bottom line was you chose to let them keep that last time out, and for that you're flunking the class. All
right, Frito, let's remember to put the profanity label on this one. It is the Doomsday podcast. Now, Stretch, what do you think after flying home on the getting on the charter as they make their way to the charter right now? What kind of drink do you feel like Mike McCarthy could use about now?
I'm going to say what he could use is a Miller Lite. What he's going to have, I mean, that's a whole nother animal.
Miller Lite is light on calories, not taste, because what's the point of having beer if you can't taste it? Lots changed over the years, but Miller Lite stellar taste, that has not changed. And boy, around the holidays, special occasion, getting together with friends, that refreshing taste of Miller Lite. Stretch, is that something, there's a Miller Lite kind of with family and friends at a Christmas gathering this week as we get ready for a Christmas Eve game against Philadelphia? Can you almost think of a time in your career where that's been happening, where a few Miller Lights were either around a fire or in the house or by the Christmas tree?
How about in the house and the fire's going? We're going to get some cold weather here this week, and you know what? Some people like a little hot chocolate, and you know what, Mosley, you and I'd crack open a Miller Lite and get the fire going a little bit, and we might even carol out a song or two, Mosley.
What is your favorite carol, Christmas carol, would you say?
I don't know that I have a favorite carol. I'd say my favorite Christmas song is, Andy Williams, The Most Wonderful Time of the Year. Doesn't get much better than that, does it?
The most wonderful time of the year. All right, to get Miller Lite delivered right to your door, visit MillerLite.com/Doomsday. Make that a / on that Doomsday. Visit MillerLite.com/Doomsday, or you can find it pretty much anywhere that sells beer. Celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 96 calories and 3.2 carbs per 12 ounces. Stretch, we will talk to you on Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas to you. Happy holidays. And we encourage people to watch tonight as you get ready to do some WFAA Channel 8 TV. Thank you, Stretch.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you. Merry Christmas to my man, Frito. Have a blessed evening, fellas. Sorry to bother you.
There he goes. Glenn Stretch Smith with his Stretch Plays on the Doomsday Podcast. All right, there he is. And, F. Yeah, some rough ones there as he hands out. And Mike McCarthy. Ed gets the boy. While we were kind of taping that while you were working the locker room and all that. Mike McCarthy takes one. And oh, by the way, Ed, Bones Fossil, an old friend named Bones Fossil, got some very negative things. Now, Ed, your point. I mean, we praise Dan Quinn a lot. This has been a tremendous pass rush. Micah Parsons did have a sack, but I don't think you would say that they were consistent in. And by the way, Trevor Lawrence made some nice plays against the pass rush to escape and make some plays downfield. Ed, you alluded to it. Kelvin Joseph gets benched at some point. Was it late third quarter, maybe early fourth quarter? They finally had to get him off the field. He bites on a double move. That makes it 27-17, and then of course, after Dak's mistake, then he gets beat. He just got beat on a straight up play where a guy was being a little more physical than he was in the end zone. And they are in trouble from an injury standpoint, and as you called it, incompetent standpoint on defense right now.
I mean, if you look at the last 6 Jaguars possessions, Trevor Lawrence went 6 for 6 for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns on third down in the final 6 drives. When he was facing pressure, he went 6 for 9 for 44 yards and 2 touchdowns on the final 6 drives. When they blitzed, he went 6 for 6 for 77 yards and a touchdown on the final 6 drives. He had been relatively ineffective to that point on their first 7 possessions. But once he threw the interception, he responded in an incredibly strong and favorable way for Jacksonville. And, I just didn't think Dan Quinn, he didn't have enough players at the end of the game in the back of his defense. And losing Leighton Vander Esch was a significant thing. We didn't even mention him. And really disconcerting that it's a neck injury, and he's a player that we know came into the league with neck issues that cause teams to have a lot of red flags about him. And then he's had neck surgery since he's been in the NFL. So let's hope he has a career. McCarthy said he had not yet been able to check on the injured players yet, but that might be the most significant loss of all. Dorrance Armstrong came into the game with an injury, played, left twice with the training staff hurt. And then they've all got all kinds of issues with injuries in the secondary. Donovan Wilson left for a time. Nobody's throwing at Trayvon Diggs. And they've got a right corner situation that they have been unable to stabilize since they lost Jordan Lewis. And, Anthony Brown was supposed to be a guy who was getting targeted in a vulnerable spot on the defense. And now you don't even have his backup in there anymore. So that's a big concern, I think, for Dan Quinn and the defense, is how are they going to be able to defend the perimeter run game we saw was a weakness today, and then just the downfield passing game when the rush doesn't get home.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm another team, and the Cowboys had a really nice that route to the Hendershot, it worked for them. Jacksonville turned around and did it to the Cowboys and put Barr in a bad situation, got him in a one-on-one matchup. So this is going to be interesting to see this team come down the stretch. And Ed, we prepare for a Christmas Eve extravaganza. The Werder and Mosley love spending Christmas Eve together. I know we've tried to do it for years, Ed. It doesn't usually work out, but here we are with that opportunity as the Cowboys turn around and play on a Saturday night or Saturday afternoon, Christmas Eve against the Eagles. Ed, it does take on a little bit different feel. It's like you said. Now the Cowboys seemingly will have to accept their fate. They're not going to win the division. It would take an all-out collapse by the Eagles, and that doesn't seem to be coming. But I guess the silver lining is it would allow the Cowboys to feel great about themselves again, and not stay down and think and focus on these other things as far as blowing these leads. That stuff's still going to be out there. But if you beat the big bully and beat the Eagles, it at least restores some integrity and belief in the Cowboys. So in that way, Ed, it might be the perfect team to be able to try to bounce back and play against.
Well, yeah, to your point, Dak Prescott said for him and for this team, now it's all about trying to create some postseason momentum. Some momentum going into the playoffs, which they thought they manufactured last year by beating the hell out of the Eagles when the Eagles didn't play anybody and the Cowboys played their starters, where they scored 56 points against them or something like that. So I'm sure the Eagles will be mindful of that. They'll be mindful of what Micah Parsons said, because in their minds it diminished what Jalen Hurts has accomplished this year, even though I think he was trying to say, how can you discern? They're so great. Like, how can you pick any one thing or any one player and give him this award when they've been just the best team in football? And isn't that the ominous challenge here for the Cowboys? I mean, they're in the worst possible situation they've been in defensively from a personnel standpoint. And you've got to play an Eagles team that, I don't know, with Kansas City and Buffalo is probably the hardest offense to handle and control, because they can beat so many different ways with the run game, with the running quarterback, with the passing game, the big physical receiver. They get vertical on you. I just think, maybe the solution, and I don't know. The Cowboys have shown us what they're capable of when they go to Minnesota and have the biggest blowout win on the road in franchise history, and take down a team that hadn't lost at home all year, had only lost one game. They were 10-1. I think we've seen some flaws in Minnesota since then. I think the Eagles are a different thing. But since the Cowboys have shown us the last couple of weeks and multiple times what they're capable of in terms of, hey, we can lose to anybody in any situation, they do need to go out there and say, hey, we can also beat anybody in this league. And if they can find a way to win against the Eagles, maybe they can restore that sense of pride and feel, some momentum and create some momentum going into the playoffs that would be useful. But you look at going into the playoffs and, this team's lost 4 times this year, and 3 of those times have been on the road. So they're not a great road team. And they've lost, as we said, to Green Bay, which probably won't make the playoffs. They've lost to Jacksonville, probably won't make the playoffs. Not right away, because is Tampa Bay any good? Is Carolina any good if that's where they wind up? So they could conceivably win a first-round playoff game on the road, but being on the road is not a very good situation for this team. Is going to need some postseason success if Mike McCarthy's going to avoid the kind of off-season speculation about his job status he endured last year after they lost in the first round of the 49ers.
All right, Ed, the last thing this team can do when they go on the road is get a 2-touchdown lead, right? That's the last thing. That's the
Play
thing
from behind.
They've got to avoid that at all costs. They need to get behind and see if that works for them better. Ed, I'll have to say it, though. When you go on the road, you do an incredible job. I mean, you are kind of our road warrior, and we appreciate it. You've had a little adversity there, but you'd never know it. You'd never know it from listening to the Doomsday podcast. So please order some appetizers. Love to send you some potato skins. Put it on the Doomsday account. And Ed, have a good trip, and I cannot wait to see you on Christmas Eve.
Very nice. I look forward to it as well. I wish the game was going to be of the magnitude we anticipated all year long, but sadly it's been greatly diminished, although in some ways, like you said, it's more important now to the Cowboys than it was before.
It is a restore the credibility type opportunity for the Cowboys. For Ed Werder of ESPN and Doomsday fame, and Mark Frito Friedman of Frito Nation Productions, I'm Matt Mosley. Good night from far North Dallas.
Hey, it's Mark Goodman.
And I'm Alan Light.
On today's podcast, Record Store Day founder Carrie Colleton is joining us to discuss the April 20th RSD special releases.
Plus, we'll talk live with our audience, the Sound Up Pod Squad, and find out who still listens to vinyl. And some updates from the Beatles universe.
Oh, good. Sound Up with Mark Goodman and Alan Light, the only music podcast that matters. Get it on Pandora, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.